In these very difficult times, it is easy to get overwhelmed by all that is happening around us. We feel powerless before the collapse of our old way of life as we know it. We do not know if we can reinvent ourselves to be able to get employed once again, especially those of us who have lost our jobs. We do not even know how we can get our businesses going. And nationally, there is so much that is evil, so much bad governance, that we do not know anymore how to fight it. Good people would like to run as candidates for the coming elections, but they get intimidated by the power, the money, the machinery of those who are so entrenched that they have monopolized power, such that we call them political dynasties. Now, how do we deal with our own powerlessness in the face of very powerful enemies? In this familiar story of David and Goliath, we are reminded once again of what it means to fight in spite of formidable odds, to gain courage, to face forces that are much bigger than ourselves. So what does it take to fight the giants in our lives? First of all, in this story, we are told that we must fight with the living God. It takes faith in the living God to deal with the giants in our lives. David, when he heard about Goliath's challenge, asked this in relation to the men who were in fright about fighting this giant. He asked, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" To David, the inability of Israel's warriors to take on the challenge of fighting Goliath was in fact a reproach for the uncircumcised Philistine. No matter if he enjoys all the physical advantages and the weaponry of a seasoned warrior, is not at all, as far as David is concerned, not at all part of the armies of the living God. It is this confidence that enables David to fight, in spite of the contrast between him and Goliath. The battle is certainly uneven. Goliath was at least 10 feet tall. He had a helmet of bronze on his head. He had on a full armor, a coat of mail, which in fact weighed at least 157 pounds. And just the iron head of his spear weighed 19 pounds. In contrast, David only had a sling and 5 smooth stones that he took from a brook. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, it is said. "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" Goliath said. And David answered, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Now, this confidence in the living God is also what differentiated David from Saul as a leader. Saul was previously described as also very tall. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people, it is said. You will find that in chapter 9, verse 2, chapter 10, verse 25. He was at least a shoulder above. And he is, of course, a veteran warrior. And he was also once a good leader. That was Saul. But this time, Saul no longer had the confidence that God will go with him. He had lost heart before the realities of fighting a man as experienced and as big as Goliath. So he tells David, "You are not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." Now, like Saul, it is easy for us to get overwhelmed by the facts on the ground, the fact of God and His presence fades before the physical and material realities that we have to deal with. But David had faith both in the living God and in his own self-identity. Besides confidence in the living God, David had confidence in his own history of deliverance. He tells Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. When there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." As a shepherd, David has gained experience in what it means to take on ferocious animals that are much bigger than him. Now, this history, along with the consciousness that God has always aided him, now gives him courage to face down Goliath. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion, from the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David also had confidence to fight with the weapons that he knows. When Saul tried to put on his own armor on David, equipping him with a bronze helmet, a coat of mail, and also a sword, David tried to put them on, but then he cannot walk or move, and he decided, "I cannot go with this, for I have not tested them." Unused to the weapons of a warrior, David would rather fight as a shepherd with the weapons that are known to him: a sling, stones, and a shepherd's staff. Faced this time with the big challenge of fighting an enemy whose defeat will have both a national and a spiritual significance, David chose to rely on at least two things that he knows from his own history. the certainty of deliverance by the living God, and his own battle skills that he acquired from his self-identity as a shepherd. Now, what are the practical implications of this story to our day and time today? First, true knowledge of the living God leads not to a passive acceptance of what is, but to an active seeking of what can be. Now, this passive acceptance of all that is bad is often disguised as belief in the sovereignty of God in history. No, to truly know God means that we actively seek what can be, knowing that we are not unaided in our pursuit of the good or of alternative arrangements of reality. The Church of God, secondly, may look small and ragtag, but we are the armies of the living God. This is our self-identity. As against the 10 spies, you remember, who got intimidated by the size of the fortified cities, the giant race of the Nephilim, who were descendants of Anak. And they said, "We seem to ourselves as grasshoppers, and so we seem to them." Kahit sa sarili nilang mata, maliit sila. And they imagine na ganun din ang tingin ng kanilang mga kalaban. One of our writers, in fact, a national artist, si Joaquin, once had an essay called Our Heritage of Smallness. Mahilig daw tayo sa mga tingi-tingi. Masyadong maliit ang ating pagtingin sa mga bagay-bagay. Hindi raw po tayo capable ng mga malalaking obra na kagaya ng mga nobela. Mahilig tayo sa mga short story. Now, I think ito pong pag-iisip na ganito, na tayo ay maliit, ay hindi tama. There are many countries that are just as small as we are, and some are in fact smaller. Yung Great Britain has about the same land size, and it is an island as well, as we are. And yet, it calls itself great. Kahit na maliit lang siya, it used to have an empire that covered 2/3 of the world. Tayo, palaging ang tingin natin, napakaliit natin to be significant in the world's stage. Wala po yan sa size. You do not measure importance by size. Whether you are a country, or you are an organization, or you are a church. You're just a small church. But we must remember we are the armies of the living God. And also remember that the kingdom is often a movement of the small. Paul says there are not many of us who are rich or wise or powerful. But with the help of the living God, we can take on forces that are much bigger than ourselves. Thirdly, we need to always rely on our experience of God and our own sense of context. We always need to ask, what will work? According to our natural gifting, our own resources, our own expertise as individuals and as a people. This story tells us that you cannot win if you fight with other people's weapons, if you fight within their arena of expertise. It should be something outside, kagaya po ni David. Nobody then could imagine that with a slingshot, he could kill a giant like Goliath. Kailangan lang ng konting imagination. So we don't try and fight according to the world's weapons. They may have lots of money, lots of machinery, lots of all the, interventions that can be bought by money. But we have God, and we are the armies of the living God. One of our economists, Shelito Habito, has long said that development efforts should also take into account your own geography. The Philippines, for instance, has a very long coastline. We are an island. But our economy is land-based rather than sea-based. We could have developed shipyards. We could have been an international maritime port. But we did not develop in that way. Gumaya-gaya lang tayo sa mga development efforts ng ibang bansa. Now, most development theories actually aim at modernization. Yung tinatawag na mga path ng development ng mga Western countries. But is this really the path that we want for our people? We have seen what kind of modernization does to people. There is jobless growth. Pwedeng tumataas yung inyong economy, yung GNP, pero yung mga tao walang trabaho. And people are replaced by machines. And many people in many Western countries, they live and they die alone. Ako po ay nasa England nung merong isang nabalita na merong elderly na namatay sa kanyang apartment. And she was not discovered until 1 week. Nung medyo umaamoy na yung bangkay, saka na-discover na patay na siya. Mabuti na yung usyoso yung ating neighborhood, kagaya rito sa Pilipinas. In other words, are we prepared to substitute yung prosperity, with neighborliness? Maring progresibo, maraming pera, pero malungkot. Many of our OFWs, yung mga overseas Filipino workers, complain. And the first thing they complain about is loneliness. Yun po ay hindi nabibili ng pera. There are too many efforts at doing good, whether you're talking development or social change. But many of these prove unsuccessful because we are always trying to catch up with our neighbors. We are always trying to imitate other people's way of fighting and flourishing. We must try and think about our own history, our own geography, our own resources, the things that God has given to us, and build on this. What are the expertise that we already have as people and as a nation? Ganito po tayo uunlad. So I pray that the Lord shall bless us as we become more conscious of who we are and what we have, like David.